What's going on, Guardians? It's Tizzle here, and in today's subclass school, we'll be covering the abilities of Stasis. Every subclass has 4 abilities, being supers, grenades, melees, and class abilities. I will only cover class abilities that are specific to a subclass. Think like Titan Thruster on Arc or the Radiant Dodge on Solar. But Stasis has none of that. I'm also skipping my long intro talking about testing methodology simply to save some time because there really is not a lot to cover with Stasis abilities. Each class only has 1 super and 1 melee ability, and then there are only 3 grenades total. So let's jump right into it and cover supers first. Starting with Hunter. Their stasis is called Silence and Squall. The in-game description reads, summon 2 stasis Kamaz, Silence and Squall that you throw one after another. Silence creates a flash freeze blast that freezes and damages targets. Squall creates a stasis storm that slows and damages targets caught inside. So this is pretty straightforward. It doesn't do great single target damage, but it's pretty nice for ad clear. The stasis storm it conjures lasts for 14 seconds or 16 seconds with Whisper of Durance, and it applies a lot of slow and can freeze big groups of ads. And it also deals 300% increased damage against non-boss frozen enemies. So yeah, it's pretty good for group ad clear. Next up is the Titan Super Glacial Quake. This says, slam your gauntlet down to create a shockwave that freezes targets and sends out stasis crystals to freeze additional ones. Supercharge your Shiver Strike for bonus damage. Sprint through stasis crystals or frozen targets to shatter them instantly. The sprinting through crystals to shatter them is actually really nice. The super's light attack punch is absolute ass in PvP. I find that it has horrible hit registration and it's just unwieldy to use. But in PvE, the crystal formations you can make are crazy and they deal a ton of damage. People have soloed raid bosses with this super. It's not a quick one-off super though, but on bosses with big hitboxes, it just decimates them. It also has really good ad clear capability. It's a very cool super because there is a bit of a skill gap to its use. This super lasts a long time and you use super energy if you use the light or heavy attack. The Destiny Data Compendium info is on screen now if you want the exact details on how it works. Next is Winter's Wrath for the Warlock. This super states that you cast out a barrage of stasis shards that freeze targets. Cast out a shockwave that shatters all frozen targets. This too is more of an ad clear super than a high single target damage super. The compendium gives more detailed info if you're curious. I do want to point out one neat interaction though. If you are running the aspect Ice Flare bolts, then when you shatter the freeze, it will often cause an Ice Flare bolt to refreeze the enemy, and you can use the shockwave to deal damage to it again. This is a great way to conserve your super energy with this super, as the detonation doesn't use super energy, only the light attack that casts out the freezing bolts. And you definitely want to take advantage of this interaction if you can, because this super definitely needs a buff in my opinion. Yes, the Balador's Wrathweavers exist to buff this super's damage, but it feels pretty weak at base and higher end content. So hopefully it gets a damage buff in the future, because the neutral game on Shadebinder is pretty damn good. So that is it for the supers. Next we'll look at the grenades, which are common to all the classes. So first up we have the Cold Snap Grenade. It says a grenade that freezes on impact and sends another seeker to find and freeze targets. This can freeze up to 3 targets as it seeks out different combatants after it freezes them. And these can be enhanced with the Osmiomancy Gloves on Warlock or on the Touch of Winter aspect on Hunter. Next we have the Duskfield Grenade. This says a grenade that shatters on impact, leaving behind a field that slows targets and freezes those who do not leave the volume. The compendium gives us some additional info if you're interested. It lasts for 7 seconds at base and 9 seconds with Whisper of Durance. And on Hunter, you can make this grenade bigger with the Aspect Touch of Winter or the Exotic Gloves Renewal Grasps. And if you combine them, you can make an extra large Duskfield. This grenade also has a quite short 1 minute 31 second base cooldown, so if you spec into Discipline, you can get these grenades quite quickly. And finally, we have the Glacier Grenade. It states a grenade that creates a wall out of stasis crystals to block damage and freeze targets. These walls can be shattered for damage. The compendium gives us a bit more info on just how they form, and just like the other grenades, they can be enhanced by Touch of Winter. These grenades are great for shatter-based builds and can work like a pseudo-Titan barricade to protect you from enemies. And while the other 2 grenades can freeze in PvP, this grenade cannot. It only applies slow. So that's it for the grenades. Let's now look at the melee abilities, of which there are only 1 for each class. Starting with Hunter, we have the Withering Blade. It states, toss a stasis shuriken at targets to damage and slow them. These ricochet off enemies so they can be decent for low tier ad clear, and they also apply slow when you get a hit, 60 in PvE and 40 in PvP. And we also get 2 melee charges, which is nice. On the Titan we have Shiver Strike, probably the worst melee in the entire game. It states hold input to leap through the air. Releasing unleashes a powerful dash attack that knocks targets back and damages them. I would argue that this melee is not powerful at all. It does apply 50 stacks of slow if you can manage to get it to land on an enemy because the hit detection on it is laughably bad. It is nice as a movement tool though in certain situations to avoid enemy attacks, kind of like an Icarus Dash or a Frenzied Blade melee. And truly, that is all this melee is good for. And lastly, we have the Penumbral Blast melee on Warlock. This states, raise your stasis staff against your foe. Send a blast of stasis forward to freeze your targets. So this melee can instantly freeze an enemy, which can be very useful in certain situations and very strong in PvP if you're accurate with it. And that is it for the stasis abilities. Clearly stasis could use some love. They have a distinct lack of grenades and melees and supers to choose from, as does Strand. So maybe this is just how the darkness subclasses are supposed to be. But here's hoping that stasis gets some love in the final shape. Anyways, that will do it for the video, and if you found it helpful, a like and subscription would be greatly appreciated. And that is a wrap on the Stasis subclass school as well. So I look forward to seeing you in the next subclass school series, which will be covering Strand. Thanks for watching and take care.